The debt threshold trap. Why $5,000 in debt feels the same as $50,000. You know that feeling when you check your credit card balance and see a number that makes your stomach drop? Maybe it is $3,000, maybe it is $8,000, maybe it is $15,000. And here is the weird part, whether it is $3,000 or $15,000, the feeling is exactly the same. It is just too much debt. Your brain stops processing the specific number and starts processing the general concept of I am in trouble. Here is what is actually happening, and this is going to explain a lot about why people stay stuck in debt for years. There is a psychological threshold around $5,000 where your brain stops treating debt like a specific problem with a specific solution and starts treating it like an insurmountable crisis. Once you cross that threshold, $5,000 feels the same as $50,000. They are both just a lot of debt. And that psychological shift is catastrophic for your finances because it changes your behavior in predictable, destructive ways. People with $5,000 in debt and people with $50,000 in debt make almost identical financial decisions, even though one situation is 10 times worse than the other. I call this the debt threshold trap, and here is the number that is going to make this concrete. Research shows that once people cross about $5,000 in credit card debt, their probability of paying it off in the next 12 months drops by 73%. Not because the debt is mathematically unmanageable, but because psychologically, they have entered crisis mode, and crisis mode makes you stupid. My name is Nick, and today we are going to talk about why $5,000 is the most dangerous number in personal finance, how crossing that threshold changes your brain's relationship with money, and why the person who looks like they effortlessly stay out of debt is not more disciplined than you. They just understand threshold psychology. If you have ever felt paralyzed by debt and could not figure out why you were not making progress, this video is going to explain exactly what is happening in your brain, and more importantly, how to fix it. Let us get into it. The $5,000 psychological cliff. Before we go any further, I need to show you what happens in your brain when you cross the $5,000 debt threshold, because this is where everything breaks. When you have $500 in credit card debt, your brain treats it as a specific, solvable problem. I need to pay off $500. I can put $100 toward it this month and $100 next month, and I will be done in 5 months. There is a plan, there is a timeline, there is hope. When you have $2,000 in debt, it is getting uncomfortable, but it is still conceptually manageable. Okay, this is going to take some discipline, but if I cut back on spending and put $300 a month toward it, I will be debt-free in 7 months. Still specific, still solvable. But something changes around $5,000. Your brain stops doing the math. Instead of thinking $5,000 divided by $300 per month equals 17 months, your brain just thinks, this is too much, this is overwhelming, this is a crisis. And once you are in crisis mode, you stop making strategic decisions and start making survival decisions. Instead of creating a payoff plan, you make minimum payments and hope something changes. Instead of cutting spending to free up money for debt payoff, you actually spend more because the debt feels hopeless anyway. Research in behavioral economics shows this pattern consistently. There is a threshold around $5,000 where debt repayment behavior changes dramatically. Below $5,000, people make targeted payments, create plans, track progress, and typically eliminate debt within 12 to 18 months. Above $5,000, people make minimum payments, avoid looking at balances, do not create plans, and the debt grows rather than shrinks. The average time to pay off debt above $5,000 is 7 to 10 years, and many people never pay it off at all. Think about what this means. The difference between $4,500 and $5,500 is $1,000. Mathematically, it is about 3 months of extra payments, but psychologically, it is the difference between I can handle this and I am drowning. And here is where it gets even more destructive. Once you are above the threshold, adding more debt does not change your behavior much. Someone with $8,000 in debt and someone with $25,000 in debt make almost identical financial decisions. They are both in crisis mode. They are both making minimum payments. They are both avoiding the problem. This is why credit card debt tends to accelerate once you cross $5,000. You are not making decisions to reduce it, so interest compounds it upward. And because $8,000 feels the same as $5,000 psychologically, you do not change your behavior until you hit the next crisis threshold, usually around $15,000 to $20,000. The 3 debt threshold zones. Now let us break down the three distinct psychological zones of debt, because understanding which zone you are in determines the strategy you need to escape. Zone 1, the manageable zone, $0 to $3,000. In this zone, debt feels like a temporary inconvenience, not a crisis. People make extra payments, create payoff plans, and usually eliminate debt quickly. The problem with this zone is that it does not trigger enough urgency. People know they should pay it off, but it does not feel urgent, so they often do not prioritize it. Then life happens, a car repair, a medical expense, holiday spending, and suddenly they are in Zone 2. Zone 2, the uncomfortable zone, $3,000 to $8,000. This is the danger zone. Debt is high enough to be stressful, but not so high that it triggers complete panic. This is where most people get stuck because the debt feels serious but still solvable eventually. The trap here is procrastination. I will pay this off when I get my bonus, or I will tackle this after the holidays, or once I get that raise, I will throw money at it. But eventually never comes, and the debt continues growing slowly through interest and occasional charges. Zone 3, the crisis zone, $8,000 and above. Once you are here, debt stops feeling like a specific number and starts feeling like a permanent condition. Your brain categorizes it with other permanent problems like, I need a better job, or I should exercise more, things you know you should fix but feel too overwhelming to actually address. The most dangerous thing about the crisis zone is that behavior barely changes as the debt grows. Someone with $10,000 in debt and someone with $40,000 in debt make almost identical decisions. Both are in survival mode, making minimum payments, avoiding the problem, and hoping for a miracle. Here is the math that makes this so destructive. $10,000 in credit card debt at 22% annual percentage rate, with minimum payments, takes more than 30 years to pay off and costs over $20,000 in interest. But because $10,000 triggers crisis mode, people do not create a real payoff plan. They just service the debt indefinitely. Why minimum payments are a psychological trap. Let me show you the most insidious part of the threshold trap. Minimum payments are specifically designed to keep you in crisis mode forever. When you have $5,000 in credit card debt at 22% annual percentage rate, your minimum payment is typically around $100 to $150 per month. That feels manageable. You can afford $150 per month, so you make the minimum payment, and your brain processes this as I am handling my debt. But here is the math. At $150 per month in minimum payments, you will pay off that $5,000 in 22 years and pay $6,923 in interest. Total cost, $11,923. You are paying more in interest than you borrowed. But it gets worse. Most people do not stop using the card. They make their $150 minimum payment and then charge $200 that same month. Net result, the debt goes up by $50, but because they made their payment, their brain thinks they are being responsible. This is the minimum payment trap. It makes you feel like you are making progress while ensuring you never actually make progress. The credit card companies engineered this deliberately. Minimum payments are calculated to be low enough that you can afford them, but high enough that you keep paying forever. It is not a repayment system. It is a perpetual revenue extraction system. Here is what actually happens with different payment strategies on $5,000 at 22% annual percentage rate. Minimum payments, approximately $150 per month, 22 years, $6,923 in interest. $200 per month, 3.5 years, $1,748 in interest. $300 per month, 2 years, $951 in interest. $500 per month, 1 year, $534 in interest. The difference between minimum payments and $300 per month is $150 extra per month. Over the life of the debt, that $150 per month saves you 20 years and $5,972 in interest. But here is the psychological trap. When you are in crisis mode, you cannot see this math. All you see is $150 is easier than $300, so you choose the option that feels easier in the moment, even though it costs you $6,000 and 20 years of your life. The Debt Threshold Escape Framework. All right, let us talk about how to actually escape, because understanding the trap is useless if you do not have a systematic way out. Step 1. Break the crisis threshold illusion. Your first task is to stop treating debt as a vague crisis and start treating it as a specific math problem. Get the exact balances, get the exact interest rates, calculate exactly how much you are paying in interest each month, make the problem concrete instead of abstract. This feels counterintuitive because looking at the numbers is painful, but vague anxiety about debt is more paralyzing than specific knowledge. Once you know exactly what you're dealing with, you can build a plan. Step 2, the psychological chunk method. Instead of looking at $8,000 as one overwhelming number, break it into smaller, threshold-friendly chunks. Do not say, I need to pay off $8,000. Say, I need to pay off $1,000, then another $1,000, then another. Your brain can process $1,000 as manageable. It cannot process $8,000. Set micro goals. Get below $7,500 by the end of the month, instead of become debt-free. Each small threshold you cross below gives you a psychological win that builds momentum. Step 3, the interest rate hierarchy attack. List all debts by interest rate, from highest to lowest. Put every extra dollar toward the highest interest rate debt while making minimum payments on everything else. This is mathematically optimal because it saves the most interest, and it is psychologically effective because you see one debt shrinking fast, which builds motivation. Ignore the debt snowball method that tells you to pay the smallest balance first. That is psychologically satisfying, but mathematically expensive. You are in crisis mode because of math, not because you need more participation trophies. Step 4, the threshold protection protocol. Once you escape the crisis zone, you need systems to prevent re-entry. Set up automatic payments above the minimum. Even $50 above the minimum makes a massive difference. Remove cards from your phone's autofill. Freeze the card in a block of ice if you need physical barriers. The goal is not to never use credit again. It is to never cross back into the crisis threshold where your decision-making breaks down. Step 5, the income shock strategy. This is the nuclear option, but it is the fastest way out. For 3 to 6 months, treat debt payoff like a part-time job. Every available hour goes into generating extra income specifically for debt elimination. Sell things, pick up gig work, work overtime, freelance, whatever it takes. This is temporary and intense, but it works. Adding $500 to $800 per month in extra debt payments for 6 months can eliminate $3,000 to $5,000 in debt and drop you below the crisis threshold where your psychology improves. The real cost of staying above the threshold. Let me show you 2 people with the same starting debt but different relationships with the threshold. This comparison will make you want to attack your debt immediately. Person A, the crisis mode prisoner, has $6,000 in credit card debt at 22% annual percentage rate, makes minimum payments, approximately $150 per month, stays above the crisis threshold. Because they are in crisis mode, they do not create a real plan. They make minimum payments, occasionally charge more, and hope things improve. After 5 years, they still have $5,200 in debt and have paid $4,800 in interest with almost nothing to show for it. After 10 years, they still have debt and have paid over $12,000 in interest. They are perpetually trapped because they never dropped below the crisis threshold where rational decision-making returns. Person B, the threshold breaker. Same starting point, $6,000 at 22% annual percentage rate, but they recognize the crisis threshold trap and decide to break through it fast. They cut spending, pick up side work, and put $400 per month toward the debt for 18 months. Painful, yes, but after 18 months they are debt-free and paid only $1,200 in interest. After those 18 months, person B redirects that $400 per month into investments. After 10 years, they have $73,000 invested, while person A is still making minimum payments. Same starting debt. The difference, person A stayed in crisis mode and paid the debt trap tax. Person B broke through the threshold fast and built wealth instead. The choice between crisis and clarity. Here is the brutal truth. Debt above $5,000 does not feel different than debt above $50,000. Once you are in crisis mode, your brain stops processing numbers rationally and starts processing emotions. An emotional decision making with debt is financially catastrophic. It keeps you making minimum payments forever. It keeps you avoiding the problem. It keeps you trapped in a cycle where the debt never shrinks. The only way out is to recognize that the crisis feeling is a psychological threshold, not a mathematical reality. $8,000 in debt is absolutely solvable with a focused plan, but only if you break through the crisis threshold, where your brain can think strategically again. You have two options: stay above the threshold, stay in crisis mode, and make minimum payments for decades, or attack the debt with intensity for 12 to 24 months, break below the threshold, and reclaim your financial life. Most people choose option 1 because it feels easier in the moment. They discover 20 years later that easier in the moment means financially destroyed forever. Do not be most people. Pull your debt balances right now. Calculate the exact payoff timelines at different payment amounts. Choose the aggressive timeline that hurts but works, and execute with the intensity of someone who realizes that 18 months of discomfort beats 20 years of debt slavery. Your future self is begging you to do this. Do not let them down. That is it for this one. If this explained why your debt feels impossible, even though the math says it is solvable, hit subscribe and share this with someone who is stuck in crisis mode. I will see you in the next one.